So I just finished A Hat in Time, which is now one of my favorite games that I have ever played. I really like a lot of the way that this game approaches its mechanics and its level design, and of course its visual aesthetic, which is very cutesy, very bright and colorful, very inviting. Makes you feel just very happy when you look at it and when you play it. You know, it's got that charm to it, like a lot of the games that it's trying to emulate, at least visually. Things like Super Mario Sunshine and The Wind Waker, generally a lot of GameCube kid-centric games. Games that are kind of aimed at kids and don't want them to feel scared or unhappy while playing them. They want to invite them in and really, as easily as possible, get them into this world and get them invested so that they'll then have that investment and want to push forward when the difficulty starts ramping up. And A Hat in Time does this about as well as any of those games do. And A Hat in Time has all of that. It's got a very charming, very beautiful to look at, just really fun visual art style to it. Lots of little details here and there and little visual gags and whatnot that just make it a joy to look at. It definitely gets very high marks on the aesthetic side of things. Now on the level design side of things, I think this game actually has a really cool and interesting approach to how it handles its level design. Each of the worlds that are available to you to explore have their own sort of unique and different approach to how the level design is done, and I think that they all do it really well. First off, you've got Mafia Town, which is the first world, and the way that this level approaches its level design is similar in some ways to like a Dark Souls game or something along those lines, where those games are, of course, they're most well known for being hard and having good combat, but among people who have really dove into those games and know what they're talking about with regards to them, one big thing that they're known for is this very layered and very dense labyrinthine level design. There's not a lot of wasted space in a Dark Souls game, because everywhere you go there's something there, and it all loops in on itself in such a way that you don't have any areas that are just a corridor between the encounter that you're currently in and the next one. Everything has a purpose, everything connects to a few other things, and it all just becomes this very big cohesive mass, and that is exactly what Mafia Town is like. It's a very small level in terms of just the sheer square footage of it, but it's very dense. There's stuff to do everywhere, there's lots of little visual details all over the place, there are shortcuts and tricks and traps that will move you through and around the level. There's just a ton packed into a very small island, which I think is a very cool way to approach this kind of level design. It's not something that I see a lot in 3D platformers, which tend to be more spread out and have their content more evenly spread across a larger space. But Mafia Town doesn't go for that. It's just incredibly dense. There's tons of stuff to do in this level, and it's a very small level, so it doesn't take long to get around it. But this is a double-edged sword, because while it is a very small level with tons of stuff to do in it and it doesn't take long to get from place to place, the fact that it is so dense and there is so much stuff everywhere results in kind of a cluttered level that can be really difficult to find your way around. There are certain optional objectives in the game which require you to find a little warp portal that's somewhere in the level, and you just have a picture of the warp portal and a little bit of its surroundings to guide you to where it is, and this can be really hard to find in certain levels, and in particular it's very difficult to find in Mafia Town because there's just so much stuff everywhere. Everything is so dense and so packed in that it can be really easy to just kind of lose yourself in the visual clutter and not be able to triangulate the position of this objective that you're looking for, which is not ideal. But that's the thing about level design. It really is a series of trade-offs, and the trade-off that Mafia Town makes is, again, being kind of cluttered and hard to find your way around in, but I think that that's worth it for the fact that it is just such an engaging level to exist in. You run around and there's stuff to do everywhere. There's little visual details all over the place, bits of flavor stuff in the background, signage and whatnot that kind of hints at you about some of the plot, and just generally makes the world feel like it has more personality to it, and it's great. It's a lot of fun to just exist in this level. It's just a little bit difficult sometimes to actually find the objective that you're looking for. Next up is Deadbird Studios, which is a movie studio, and this level is more of a progression of linear levels. Or some slightly less linear, but for the most part it's a linear progression of little objectives that are less exploration focused and more just focused on you're in this area and you have to complete an objective either by reaching the end of a linear run-through level, kind of like what you'd find in a lot of Sonic games, or by just performing an objective in this little area that doesn't have a whole lot of exploration to it. And this is actually a dichotomy between the two halves of Dead Bird Studio, because it is a world that is split into two halves, two level progressions, culminating in a finale. On the one side, you have the train levels, which are, as you would expect from a train, you know, they're more on rails, they're more linear, they're more action-focused. You go to the place and you do the thing. One of these levels is actually just a run to the end of the level before time runs out and everything explodes type of level. And on the other hand, you have DJ Grooves' levels, which take place in a little city. There's a lot of partying going on, and you run around this little small city area that doesn't have a whole lot of exploration to do in it, and just perform simple little objectives that require you to move from place to place and hit various triggers to signify progression through the objectives. And both of them are a lot of fun. I can't really say that I prefer either one to a significant degree. I think that the train levels are better from a mechanical perspective in terms of just the actual gameplay that you're performing, but the DJ Grooves levels have a lot to offer in terms of personality and comedy. So I think that these levels are both really fun and kind of evenly matched in different ways, and they culminate in this big fun boss fight that I really enjoyed a lot. After that is this Haunted Forest kind of level, which takes a much more traditional approach to 3D platformer level design. It's kind of spread out, lots of wide flat areas with little discrete platforming challenges peppered out throughout them. This level feels the most like something that you would find in a game like Super Mario Sunshine or some other GameCube era platformer or adventure game. Which isn't to say that it doesn't do unique and interesting things. Every level in this game has one or two missions in it that kind of break the mold and just really do something unique and creative that I wasn't expecting. In fact, the Haunted Woods level has one of my favorite examples of this, where you enter a haunted mansion, which is patrolled by a ghost who, as far as I know, cannot be fought. I haven't attempted to fight her, but I'm assuming that you probably can't based on the way that the enemy is presented. So what you have to do is explore this mansion while avoiding the ghost by hiding under things whenever she comes into the room and generally staying out of her way, and perform little objectives that allow you to get keys to open further doors within the mansion and whatnot. And it actually reminds me a lot of Luigi's Mansion, which is not something that I was expecting from this game by any means, but I'm glad it's in there because it's a lot of fun and a very cool set piece. At the same time, this level has a lot of the same sort of charm that you come to expect from this game at this point. There's a really fun character who... I'm trying to remember who this particular character was voiced by. I know that somebody in this game is voiced by Rice Pirate, but I think that that might be the badge salesman. Maybe it was Stamper that was the character I'm thinking of. Regardless, they do a really great job on this character. He's a really fun ghost guy who steals your soul and has you sign a contract to do some work for him and in order to obtain your soul back. And there's some little flavor text about how you feel cold and empty when he takes your soul, but other than that, there's no real change. And that's the framing device for the missions in this level, is that you're doing odd jobs for this guy in order to get your soul back. Which really strikes me as funny, because normally if somebody's going to take your soul and force you to perform work for them in order to get it back, you would assume that they'd be having you do some kind of horrible dirty work or something like that. But it really is just odd jobs that he could probably pay anyone to do, but he just decides to set up a trap and steal your soul and force you to do them. You sign a contract with them and everything, and Hatgirl just like puts like a little scribble in some presumably alien language with like a picture of like a winky face and a heart on it as well. She's really chipper about literally signing away her soul. The last major sandbox type level in this game is these alpine mountaintops where you're very high off the ground and there are zip lines all over the place that you can zip along to get from place to place. And this is the most spread out area in this game. This level is huge in terms of square footage and has by far the lowest density of content in this game, which a lot of people would view as a bad thing, but I think that this level actually handles it pretty well, because the way that it does it is by having different types of smaller levels within this area that are kind of sectioned off onto their different mountaintops, and you have to zipline between them to reach them. So they have these sort of different feels to them. It almost feels like a few different levels that are just in the same area and don't have a loading screen between them. Having said that, it is probably my least favorite level of the game because it is so segmented and so spread out. Every other level in the game, you can get to the content that you're looking for much faster, but in this level, it takes longer to get where you're going, and it's also easier to get lost on the way there, even than it is in Mafia Town, because at least in Mafia Town, you know that you're somewhere near what you're looking for, whereas in this Alpine Mountain level, there's just not a whole lot of landmarks, and what you're looking for could be anywhere out there in the void, you know? You just gotta kind of wander and look for it. But But even though it is, in my opinion, the weakest level in the game, you still got a lot of fun little platforming challenges, neat concepts for different thematic ideas that you can throw in there. There's just a lot to see in every level in this game, and this is no exception, and the platforming is always great. Which leads me into my next bit, the mechanics, which I think are really strong in this game. Just running around and jumping on stuff and moving in general feels really fluid and satisfying. It's got a very smooth, very polished, oiled up feel to it, where you never feel like you're butting up against much jank in this game, which is great. And you also have this very expressive moveset where you've got a double jump and different levels of sprinting and whatnot that you can really find all sorts of ways to get around in this level, especially when you get into the later parts of the game and you start getting badges that will further increase your repertoire of movement so that you can start grappling on different hooks in the game, and you can dive into a wall, and instead of bouncing off of it, you'll just run up it a little bit. And things start to get really crazy with the kind of maneuvers and the kind of traversal that you can pull off in this game. And at some point in the game, depending on when you save up enough jewels for it, you can also get a badge that will upgrade your sprint to a scooter. And that is good and fun, and I like it. I kind of feel like the mechanics are what I have the least to say about in this game because there aren't a whole lot of them, and they're just good and polished. There's not really much to say beyond that. You know, jumping feels good. The double jump is set up in a way that it really gives you a lot of control over where you land. The dive move allows you to pull off some really cool looking maneuvers. It's all just good. I don't really have any complaints or major problems to bring up about the platforming in this game. It's just solid mechanics. That's all there is to it. I think that there's definitely a lot more to look at and talk about with regards to the level design and the visual thematic elements of the game. I mean, I haven't even talked about the plot, which is really excellent, but you know, I'll get to that in a sec. But yeah, the mechanics are they're good. That's really all there is to it. They are solid mechanics. I don't really have any major issues to discuss about them. I like running around in this game. It feels good. Aside from that, plot-wise, there's not a whole lot here in this game, but what is there is very fun and charming, and I'm glad that it's there. I think that this game would be significantly lessened without what plot it does have. My one major complaint about that plotline is that it is kind of just forgotten for a large chunk of the midsection of the game, which instead focuses on the level-specific plotlines with minor characters that are set up, and these plotlines are all fun, but I do wish that the game could have struck more of a balance between the main plot and these side plots, because while I enjoy those side plots, I wish that they hadn't come at the expense of the main plot, which just really disappears after like level 3 of Mafia Town, only to reappear at the very end of the game. But what is there of this main plot when it does show up is really great. I think you get a lot of fun interactions between Hat Girl and Mustache Girl in the early parts of the game, and then at the end of the game when Mustache Girl shows up again and you go to fight the final boss, you get a lot of really good payoffs to stuff that was set up earlier in the game. I'm not actually going to go into too much detail about the endgame stuff because I actually really like the ending of this game and I don't want to spoil it for people since it did surprise me and that element of surprise really elevated it, I think. Suffice it to say that it goes some places that I didn't expect it to and pulls off a much more hype ending than I was expecting. I was expecting something much more low-key, but what I got is really bombastic and over-the-top and a lot of fun to watch play out. Besides that, as I've mentioned before, the characters in this game are all just really charming and fun to interact with. There's a lot of really great voice acting in this game that's very kind of over-the-top and sort of cartoony, and just a lot of fun to listen to. It really fits the tone of the game well. There's some really good performances from people like Rice Pirate and JonTron, even though JonTron is like a very bit player. Like he only has, I think, 2 lines in the game, but they're delivered well. The tone fits the sort of cartoony and over-the-top aesthetic of the game. He fits right in, and I think that having these sorts of performances really elevates the game world and makes it feel more alive and like it pops out more, you know? Yeah, overall, I think A Hat in Time is just a really class act. It is, again, one of my favorite games that I've ever played. I actually put it at number 4 on my ranking of all the games that I have finished. Yeah, it's up there at number 4, right there in number 4 slot on my 3x3. Really excellent game. I am going to be giving it on my Rosen meter, as you might expect, a 10 out of 10.
And everything was lovely once again. Wonderful.
A Hat in Time can be found on Steam for $30, and at that price, I would say that it is absolutely worth it for the amount of value that you get out of it. It is a bit of a short game. There's only 40 objects to collect as opposed to your average Mario game, which has closer to, say, 120 or so, depending on which one you're talking about. I mean, obviously Super Mario Odyssey has a fucking ridiculous amount. But for a more average Mario game, this is about a third as long as those usually are. But I think that there's a trade-off involved there, because in a lot of Mario games, a lot of those stars tend to be kind of fillery. You know, there's the collect X number of coins star, and there's the go back and do it again but faster star in some of them, like Super Mario Galaxy had some of those. While in A Hat in Time, on the other hand, every single mission feels fun and unique and adds something to the game. There's no filler here. So given the amount of content that you're getting compared with the amount of content on display in your average Mario game, I'd say that there's probably about half as much, and it's about half the price, so fair enough in my book. So I would definitely recommend picking up A Hat in Time at $30, or if that seems a little steep to you anyway, then feel free to wait for a sale or something. I'm sure that there will be plenty of those as the game, lives out its life on Steam. But it is really just an excellent game that I really enjoyed a lot and would highly recommend to anybody who's at all interested in this sort of 3D platformer. Definitely look into it.